Data Analytics, Importing Data into Excel. Introduction. You might have to use data from various sources for analysis. In Excel, you can import data from different data sources. Some of the data sources are as follows: Microsoft Access Database, from a web page, text file, SQL Server table, SQL Server Analysis Cube, XML file. You can import any number of tables simultaneously from a database. Importing data from Microsoft Access Database. We will learn how to import data from MS Access Database. Follow the steps given below. So step 1, open a new blank workbook in Excel. Number 2, click on Data tab on the ribbon. So this is the Data tab. And then click From Access in the Get External Data group. Then the Select Data Source dialog box appears. So this is a Select Data Source dialog box. Then number 4, select the Access Database file that you want to import. And Access Database files will have the extension ACCDB or Access Database. The Select Table dialog box appears, displaying the tables found in the Access Database. You can either import all the tables in the database at once or import only the selected tables based on your data analysis needs. So these are the tables in the database. So you can click on this to enable selection of multiple tables. Step 5, select the Enable Selection of Multiple Tables box and select all the tables. So select all the tables. Then click OK. The Import Data dialog box appears. So here we have several options. Select how you want to view this data in your workbook. So you can choose table, pivot table, report, pivot chart, etc. So where do you want to put the data? In an existing worksheet, in a new worksheet. So these are the options. Or add this data to data model. So these are the options. As you observe, you have the following options to view the data you are importing in your workbook. So it can be a table, pivot table, report, pivot chart, or Power View report. You also have the option only create connection. Further, pivot table report is selected by default. Excel also gives you options to put the data in your workbook. So in an existing worksheet or new worksheet. You will find another checkbox that is selected and disabled to add this data to the data model. Whenever you import data tables into your workbook, they are automatically added to the data model in your workbook. You will learn more about data model in later videos or lectures. You can try each one of the options to view the data you are importing and check how the data appears in your workbook. If you select table, existing worksheet option gets disabled. New worksheet option gets selected and Excel creates as many worksheets as the number of tables you are importing from the database. The Excel tables appear in these worksheets. If you select Pivot Table Report, Excel imports the tables into the workbook and creates an empty pivot table for analyzing the data in the imported tables. You have an option to create the pivot table in an existing worksheet or a new worksheet. Excel tables for the imported data tables will not appear in the workbook. However, you will find all the data tables in the pivot table field list along with the fields in each table. If you select Pivot Chart, Excel imports the tables into the workbook and creates an empty pivot chart for displaying the data in the imported tables. You have an option to create the pivot chart in an existing worksheet or a new worksheet. Excel tables for the imported data tables will not appear in the workbook. However, you will find all the data tables in the pivot chart field list, along with the fields in each table. If you select Power View Report, oh, by the way, this is already removed from Excel, so maybe we'll just skip this one. If you select the option Only Create Connection, a data connection will be established between the database and your workbook. No tables or reports appear in the workbook. However, the imported tables are added to the data model in your workbook by default. You need to choose any of these options based on your intent of importing data for data analysis. As you observe above, irrespective of the option you have chosen, the data is imported and added to the data model in your workbook. So the Power View will not be used because it is now removed by Microsoft in newer versions of Office. But let's take a look at this. If you select Power View Report, Excel imports the tables in the workbook and creates a Power View report in a new worksheet. You will learn how to use Power View reports in analyzing data in later version. But again, for our case, we'll be using Power BI. Excel tables for the imported data tables will not appear in the workbook. However, you will find all the data tables in the Power View report field list, along with the fields in each table. Sometimes you might have to use the data that is refreshed on a website. So, how do we import data from a website? You can import data from a table on a website into Excel. So, steps are you open a new blank workbook in Excel. Step 2, click the Data tab on the ribbon. Then click from Web in the Get External Data group. The new web query dialog box appears. So the new web query. Enter the URL of the website from where you want to import data in the box next to address and click Go. So in this case, we have here msn.com, etc. Then we click Go. So we place here the address and then we click Go. The data on the website appears. There will be yellow arrow icons next to the table data that can be imported. So we have here arrow icons. That means that it can be imported. Click the yellow icons to select the data you want to import. Let's say, for example, this one. This turns the yellow icons into green boxes with a check mark as shown in the following screenshot. So this. Click the import button after you have selected what you want. The import data dialog box appears. So where do you want to put the data? So we have existing or new worksheet. Then specify where you want to put the data. So again, it can be an existing worksheet or a new worksheet. Then we click OK. So there, arrange the data for further analysis and or presentation. So you notice we have here now the data. Copy pasting data from web. Another way to of getting data from a web page is copying and pasting the required data. Insert a new worksheet. Copy the data from a web page and paste it on the worksheet. So insert a new worksheet, copy the data from a web page and paste it in a new worksheet. Create a table with the pasted data. So maybe in reality, you might have to do some cleaning of the data to prepare it for analysis. Importing data from a text file. If you have a data in text file or CSV or PRN files, you can import data from those files, treating them as text files. Follow the steps given below. Number 1 is open a new worksheet in Excel. Number 2, click the Data tab on the ribbon. And then number 3, click from Text in the Get External Data group. The Import Text File dialog box appears. So this is the Import Text File dialog box. You can see that PRN So this one, .txt and .csv extension file text files are accepted. Select the file. So let's say, for example, this is the file. We select the file. The selected file name appears in the file name box. So here, the open button changes to import button. And then click the import button. So text import wizard step 1 of 3 dialog box appears. So it will be shown on the next page. So we have here step 1 of 3 steps. So click the option delimited to choose the file type and click next. So next. The text import wizard step 2 of 3 dialog box appears. Under the delimiters, select other, and then in the box next to other, type the vertical slash. That is delimiter in the text file you are importing. So that's the delimiter in this text file. So again, this is the figure in where are we now? Sorry. So under delimiter, select other, in the box next to others, type vertical bar. So here we choose other, and then here we choose the vertical slash. And then we click next. So we have here now wizard text step 3 of 3. So this screen lets you select each column and set the data format. So we have here the columns. So we specify the data format. Let's say general, or but here maybe, oh yes, it could also be general. Then just click finish. So if it's a date, you can specify date or text. After you complete data formatting of columns, click finish. The import data dialog box appears. So this dialog box will now appear, and you will observe the following. Table is selected for view and is grayed. Table is the only view option you can have in this case. So the others cannot be selected. You can put the data either in an existing worksheet or a new worksheet. So where do you want to put the data? It can be an existing worksheet or a new worksheet. You can select or not select the checkbox. Add this data to data model. Click OK after you have made the choices. The data appears on the worksheet you specified, and you have imported data from the text file into an Excel workbook. Importing data from another workbook. You might have to use data from another Excel workbook for your data analysis, but somewhere else might maintain the other workbook. To get up-to-date data from another workbook, establish a data connection with that workbook. So click data and then connections in the connection group on the ribbon. So this is the connection group. So we have here connections, and the workbook connection dialog box appears. Click the add button. So this is the add button. Click the add button in the workbook connections dialog box, and then the existing connection dialog box appears. So these are the existing connections. So we have here the existing connection, and we can browse for more. So click browse for more button. The select data source dialog box appears. So select data source dialog box will appear here. So we have here also the new source button. So we have here some files here. So click the new source button. So we have the new source button. Wait. So click the new source button, and the data connection wizard dialog box appears. So this is the data connection wizard dialog box. So we have here so we can have here several connections: SQL Server, SQL Server, ODBC, or Microsoft Data Access, or other advanced. Then we click next. So for connection, so select the other advanced in the data source list and click next. The data link properties dialog box appear. So we have here the data link properties dialog box. Then set the data link properties as follows. Click the connection tab. So this is the connection tab. Use the data source name. Use the data source name. So select this one. Click the down arrow and select Excel files. So click on the down arrow and select Excel files. Then click OK. So click OK. The Select Workbook dialog box appears. So this is the Select Workbook dialog box. Browse to the location where you have the workbook to be imported is located. So we have to browse, then click OK. The Data Connection Wizard dialog box appears with Select Database and Table. So once we selected the workbook, the Data Connection Wizard dialog box will appear. In this case, Excel treats each worksheet that is getting imported as a table. The table name will be the worksheet name. So to have meaningful table names, name or rename the worksheet as possible. So select table and then just click next. So click next. The Data Connection Wizard dialog box appears with Save Data Connection File and Finish. So the file name. So save data connection file and finish. So we just click finish. Click the finish button and the select table dialog box appears. As you observe, name is the worksheet name that is imported as type table. Excuse. So click OK. The data connection will be the connection with the workbook you have chosen will be established. So we have now imported the data. Now importing data from other sources. Excel provides you options to choose various other data sources. You can import data from these in few steps. Number one is to open a new blank workbook in Excel. Click on the Data tab on the ribbon. Then click from Other Sources in the Get External Data group. So drop down with various data sources appears. You can import data from any of these data sources into Excel. In the earlier section, you have established a data connection with the workbook. Now you can import data using the existing connection. Click the Data tab on the ribbon. Click Existing Connections in the Get External Data group and the Existing Connections dialog box appears. Select the connection from where you want to import the data and click Open. It will be useful if the data connections you have in your workbook have meaningful names for the ease of understanding and locating. Go to Data Connections on the ribbon. The Workbook Connection dialog box appears and select the connection that you want to rename and click Properties. So we have the Workbook Connection Properties. Select the connection you want and then we can click on Properties. So the Connection Properties dialog box appears and the present name appears in the connection name box. Edit the connection name and click OK. So we can change the name. The data connection will have the new name that you have given. Refreshing an external data connection. When you connect your Excel workbook to an external data source, as you have seen in the above sections, you would like to keep the data in your workbook up to date, reflecting the changes made to the external data source time to time. You can do this by refreshing the data connections you have made to those data sources. Whenever you refresh the data connection, you see the most recent data changes from the data source, including anything that is new or that is modified or that has been deleted. You can either refresh only the selected data or all the data connections in the workbook at once. So we click on the Data tab on the ribbon, then click Refresh All in the Connections group. As you observe, there are two commands in the drop-down list, Refresh and Refresh All. If you click Refresh, the selected data in your workbook is updated. If you click Refresh All the data connections to your workbook are updated. When you connect your Excel workbook to an external data source, as you have seen in the above sections, you would like to keep the data in your workbook up to date, reflecting the changes made to the external data source time to time. You can do this by refreshing the data connections you have made to those data sources. Whenever you refresh the data connection, you see the most recent data changes from the data source, including anything that is new, that is modified, or that is been deleted. Oh, I think this one is repeated. Wait. Updating the data connections in the workbook. You might have several data connections to your workbook. You need to update them from time to time so that your workbook will have access to the most recent data. Click any cell in the table that contains the link to the imported data file. Click the Data tab on the ribbon and then click Refresh All in the Connections group. Select Refresh All from the drop-down list and all the data connections in the workbook will be updated. Automatically refresh data when a workbook is open. You might want to have access to the recent data from the data connections to your workbook whenever your workbook is open. Click any cell in the table that contains the link to the imported data file. Click the Data tab. Click Connections into the Connections group. The Workbook Connection dialog box appears. Step 4, click the Properties button. So the Properties button, and then the Connection Properties dialog box appears. So this is the Connection Properties dialog box. So click on the Usage tab. Check the option Refresh Data when opening the file. So we have this, Refresh Data when opening the file. So we have to check this one. You have another option also, Remove Data from the external data range before saving the workbook. You can use this option to save the workbook with a query definition but without the external data. Click OK whenever you open your workbook. The up-to-date data will be loaded into your workbook. You might be using your workbook, keeping it open for longer durations. In such a case, you might want to have the data refreshed periodically without any intervention from you. So click any cell in the table that contains the link to the imported data file. Click the Data tab on the ribbon. Click Connections in the Connections group. Then the Workbook Connection dialog box appears. Click the Properties button. This one. And then the Connection Properties dialog box appears. See the properties as follows. Click the Usage tab. Click the option Refresh Every. So enter 60 of minutes between each refresh operation and click OK. So your data will be automatically refreshed every 60 minutes or every hour. Enabling background refresh. For large data sets, consider running a background refresh. This returns control of Excel to you instead of making you wait several minutes or more for the refresh to finish. You can use this option when you are running a query in the background. However, during this time, you cannot run a query for any connection type that retrieves data for the data model. Click in any cell in the table that contains the link to the imported data file. Click the Data tab. Click Connections in the Connections group. The Workbook Connection dialog box appears. Click the Properties button. The Connection Properties dialog box appears, and then click the Usage tab. And then the Refresh Control options appear. So we have the refresh control here. Click enable background refresh. Click OK, then the background refresh is enabled for your workbook. So that ends our lecture on importing data using Microsoft Excel. So here's the first page. So importing data into Excel. So thank you very much for viewing this video.